Before we jump into today's episode, I want to tell you about something new and something cool that we just made for you. I wrote it myself. Now, here's my assumption. If you are listening to this podcast, it probably means that you want to build long-term wealth with a rental real estate portfolio, and you would probably like to do it with some creative financing. And as I talk to people who want to do that, I know a lot of questions come up, and I thought there's really no great single resource that really captures the entire picture of how that works. But I have solved that problem because I have written a new PDF that is just for you, and it's called the Step-by-Step Guide to Buying Your First or Next Rental Property Without Relying on a Lender to Approve You for a Loan. Like I said, I wrote this thing myself, and if I do say so myself, it's pretty thorough. And in this, you're going to learn a few things. I'm going to teach you about the 3 key strategies to find and negotiate quality off-market real estate deals that nobody else even knows are for sale. I'm going to teach you about what I call the yeses framework for getting off-market sellers to accept your offers. And then I'm also going to teach you the 11 simple steps that you need to take to get your first or your next deal accepted without needing to go to a bank and apply for a loan and just hope that they give it to you. So if you would like to get this free downloadable PDF, just go to rentalwealthguide.com and you can download it right now. rentalwealthguide.com and get your download of the step-by-step guide to buying your first or next rental property without relying on a lender to approve you for a loan. Now, on with the show. When the phone rings with a new lead, most average investors begin collecting information about the property. But not us thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs. We know the most important thing to do is to collect insights about the seller. Information about the property, that part's easy. Let's talk about what insights you need to gather about the seller in today's episode. Cue the theme song and let's dive right in.
Successful real estate investing isn't all about we buy houses and motivated sellers. That's the lowbrow approach, and it gives real estate investing a slimy reputation. Gross. There is a better way, a more genuine, human approach. We are thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs, and this is Sleaze-Free Real Estate Investing.
This is Jeff from the Thoughtful Real Estate Entrepreneur. Welcome to episode number 27 of Sleaze-Free Real Estate Investing, a show for those of us who never felt at home in the we buy houses crowd. In this show, we take a stand against what we call the lowbrow approach, the mainstream guru seminar distress seller approach that ends up giving real estate investors a slimy reputation. And instead, we discuss the strategies, tactics, and philosophies that we call the thoughtful way, an enlightened approach to real estate entrepreneurship that focuses on constantly sharpening the sophisticated real estate entrepreneur's 3 most critical capabilities. Number 1, seller relations skills. Number 2, deal architecture skills. And number 3, opportunity vision. When all 3 of these capabilities are successfully in motion, then you can create an excellent living today and build long-term wealth while creating value for everybody that you touch along the way. Show notes for today's episode are at www.thoughtfulre.com/E27. Please do yourself a big favor, do us a big favor as well by hitting the subscribe button in your podcast app right now before you forget. In the last episode, we discussed the difference between marketing what you do and marketing how you do it. And we talked about how is so much more powerful, especially in your marketing, than what is. So go back and listen to that if you haven't already, because that whole dynamic of marketing your how instead of your what really leads right into seller conversations. And that is what we're going to be talking about today. Because in this main course today, we're going to be talking about the key insights that we need to uncover about the seller in order to make them a winning proposal. But first, a little food for thought. After all, we are thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs, right? So we like to feed our minds with things to think about. And here's what we're thinking about today. My wife and I are getting ready to move pretty soon. We've lived in our house about 11 years, and a move like that is a lot of work because in 11 years you accumulate a lot of stuff. And so it's a great opportunity to do some major purging and major cleaning out, really literally look at everything we have and decide what gets to keep coming forward in life with us and what has to go. So as part of this, we've identified tons of stuff we're just going to get rid of. And of course, there's Goodwill and places like that we can take our things that we want to just donate. There are local Buy Nothing groups that we're both part of on Facebook and things like that. But then there's another category of stuff which I feel are things that I would like to be able to get a little bit of money out of. And so for these things, I've been either putting ads on Craigslist to sell them or on Nextdoor. And I've been observing something in myself as I do this. And while I've used Craigslist, 1,000 times more. Literally, I've used Craigslist thousands of times more than I've ever used Nextdoor.com or the app. And while Nextdoor, in many ways, as a whole, kind of drives me bananas, I find myself feeling more comfortable with the inquiries that I get from the people who respond to my ads via Nextdoor. And so I was asking myself the question, why? Why do I feel this more acceptance and openness to an inquiry from somebody via Nextdoor than I feel a sense of skepticism and keeping my guard up a little bit when somebody contacts me from Craigslist? It doesn't really make sense, right? All these people are strangers regardless. It's all strangers and it's all strangers on the internet. And it could even be literally the same people who could see my ad on both platforms. So why am I kind of giving preference to one of the platforms versus the other? Well, with Nextdoor, I know that these people live pretty close to me or in a neighboring neighborhood, if not actually right in my neighborhood. And I tend to know the kinds of neighborhoods that are surrounding mine. And I feel comfortable with the kinds of neighborhoods that are surrounding mine. And generally, I make assumptions about the type of people who are living in those neighborhoods that I feel familiar with and comfortable with. Those people feel less anonymous to me. And I feel like they're likely to be less sketchy and maybe more dependable, more likely to come at 7 p.m. when they say they're going to come at 7 p.m. than someone from Craigslist. And as I've really kind of just dissected this for myself, I realized the lesson is that people are more comfortable with those that they feel are like them. And I have more of a sense of comfort that the people I will meet through Nextdoor are likely to be more like me than the people I meet through Craigslist. Now, whether this should be the case or not is beside the point. The point is simply that natural human behavior is to trust those who feel like they are similar to us in some way. So what's the relevance of this for us? Why would I want to bring this up in a food for thought segment? Well, think about your marketing and think about the initial interactions that you have with a seller who responds to your marketing. The more you can do to show that seller or to otherwise give them clues that you have things in common with them, the more comfortable they're going to be with you. Rapport Building 101 says, of course, that if you show up to their house and you see, a hat with their favorite sports team sitting on the table, and that's your favorite sports team too, that you say something and you connect over that. That's pretty obvious. But remember, you can actually start that process well in advance of that moment. In your letter that you're sending, if you're sending that letter to landlords, you might mention in the letter that you're a landlord. In your letter to people who happen to live in the same general neighborhood as where you live, or maybe the property at least that you're contacting them about is located in the neighborhood where you live, you might mention that neighborhood by name, or you might mention that you too live in that neighborhood and you have for however long. People feel safer with people that they perceive to be more like them. So help them see who you are and those possible commonalities, and it will serve you well too. That is today's food for thought. All right, we're moving on to the main course of today's episode. And so today's topic on thoughtful real estate entrepreneurship is about the key insights that you need to uncover about the seller in order to make a winning proposal to that seller to buy their piece of real estate. And I want to thank friend and client Stephen Young, podcast listener, for the idea for this episode. He sent me a message and said, I think a great topic to discuss would be what information you need to gather. And so I've put my own spin on that. And I want to thank you, Stephen, for the great idea. I think everybody's going to get a ton of value out of this. So our overall approach here, working with our sellers, is about quality over quantity. Recently, I was having a conversation with someone who I had met through my Facebook page and somebody who had downloaded something that I published. And he was kind of having a strategy session with me. We were discussing whether I would be a fit for him as a coach or not. He was telling me that he was trying to get his wholesaling business up and running so that he could ultimately quit his corporate job. And he told me as part of that, how he had subscribed to a lead generation service, kind of a property information service. He'd paid for a skip tracing service. He'd paid for some training, etc., and had only really done one deal so far. And he was kind of feeling like his burn rate, so to speak, was adding up. And so he needed to get some results more quickly. And he then told me that according to his calculations about his business model, right, when he looked at his costs, when he looked at his closing rates, his expected margins on each deal that he did, he had determined how many offers he needed to make each day in order to make his model work. And he said, yeah, so I figured that if I could just make 15 offers per day, my model will work great. And I almost sprayed the coffee out of my mouth across my office. And I said, 15 offers? I was like, do you know how long it takes me to make 15 offers? It probably takes me 2 months to make 15 offers. Now, I'm not saying that you have to go at exactly my pace or you have to do things exactly the way I do them. But that was such an unbelievable illustration to me of a quantity over quality approach, whereas I take a quality over quantity approach and I don't even make a quote offer until I already know what the seller is going to find acceptable. So let's dive in and let's talk a little bit more about comparing and contrasting what most average investors do and what we do as trees. So most average investors, and I don't even want to say lowbrow investors because I don't think this is unique to just lowbrow investors. It's just mainstream education on real estate investing has kind of taught people to do this. So when the phone rings, most average investors focus on the property. They focus on the details of that property. They focus on the condition of that property. In other words, they focus on gathering information. It feels like they're filling out a questionnaire, and they actually may literally be filling out a questionnaire. But even if they're not, that's the experience that the seller has because it feels like a bit of an interrogation, not a conversation. These average investors are looking quickly for, quote, motivation. And motivation in their mind usually means some kind of distress or a need to sell, a problem that has to be solved in a relatively quick or urgent manner. These average investors also kind of find themselves starting to sell themselves and what they can do. They're giving information at the same time they are receiving information. These average investors are asking about price. They're trying to get right to that point. They're trying to cut to the chase, and they're looking to get an offer together in their mind as quickly as possible, or maybe more realistically, they're just looking to ascertain whether this has got any likelihood of turning into a deal for them. And I guess when you're doing it this way, you can crank out volume. Maybe you can do 15 offers per day when that's your approach. If you had enough leads to do 15 offers per day, that is. But that's not what we do as trees at all. Because gathering information about the property is easy. You can probably even get a lot of that information without even asking the seller. So why would you invest your critical face-to-face or ear-to-ear time with the seller talking about commodity information about the property when you could be learning about them? So this is what we do as thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs. We focus on the person. You know, a few episodes ago, you might recall I did a food for thought segment about a quote, and the quote said, "I don't play the odds, I play the man." That was given in the context of poker. And this person who said that was saying, I'm not so worried about the cards in my hand. I am understanding who's sitting across the poker table from me, and I am playing to them. And that's really what this is as well. Our goal is to get to know our audience. We're gathering insights about our audience, who they are, what their beliefs are, what their situation is. There is no more important question on our mind, especially as we initially get to know somebody, than who is our audience? Who are we dealing with? In the process of doing this, we're building rapport, of course. And in fact, we're almost playing a game where we're trying to see how long we can delay talking to them about the actual property, because we're just trying to see how long we can keep the conversation going between two humans about life and about finding those commonalities between us. But ultimately, we are gathering insights, not information. We are gathering insights about the person. We are sharing as little as possible about ourselves. We are really trying to make this much more of a one-way exchange of information where we are receiving information and they are the ones sharing insights. We'll pick up information about the property as we can, but we focus on the insights about the person. We also focus on getting off the phone as reasonably quickly as possible in favor of getting face-to-face with them. We know that face-to-face is at the top of the pyramid in terms of environments for us interacting with our sellers and getting to yes, getting to agreement, getting to understanding our audience. So we'll get off the phone as quickly as we possibly can without being awkward about it, of course, in favor of getting face-to-face. And ultimately, we're not making offers at all. We are making proposals. What's the difference? Well, an offer is really all about what works for you. And it sort of has this implied message of take it or leave it. Here's my offer, what works for me. Do you accept my offer? A proposal, on the other hand, is more of a suggestion. It's an educated, suggested approach that is designed to meet what both parties have indicated they need to accomplish. And a proposal invites feedback. It doesn't imply take it or leave it. So here's an important point that I really want you to remember. The more we know who we are dealing with, the more we know our audience, the better job we can do presenting our proposition to them in a way that will have the highest likelihood of resonating with them. Right? We might know what offer or proposal we want to make, but until we really know who our audience is, we will not know how to frame that message, how to present it, how to explain it in a way that aligns with what they are trying to accomplish, their worldview, who they are, and all of that, because those are the things that will get them to say yes. So the question for today on our episode here now is, what insights do we need to have about our seller in order to make a great proposal? And why are those insights so important? We're not going to talk about how to ask those questions and get those insights today. That's going to be in our next episode. So for today, we're going to focus on what insights do we need to have about our seller in order to make them a great proposal ultimately. And why are those insights important? Okay, insight number one that we're looking for. Who is this person? What is their profile overall? Okay, are we talking about a widowed retiree? Are we talking about a married 40-year-old with 3 young kids? See, those would be very different people, of course. Where do they live? How nice is their neighborhood? This is one of the first things I always do is I look up the address of the house where I sent the letter, because that's where they live. And I want to see, what does it look like? What does the tax record show that it's worth? How nice is that house compared to the property that I reached out to them about? It just gives me context about who I'm dealing with. Does this person work? If so, what do they do in their work? You know, I have a seller right now whose property I just put in contract, and he is a business consultant. And knowing that right off the bat actually gave me some good ways to create rapport with him, but also indicated that he was going to be an extremely analytical and detail-oriented person, which has absolutely played out. That's such an important insight about him. so that I know how to present my propositions to him in a way that will match who he is and how he thinks. What other clues do you see that are telling you something about them? Did they mention that they just got back from Palm Springs where they split time? Well, that's going to tell you something about them and their financial situation and where they are in life. Are they saying they can't even find really a time to talk to you because they're always at work and they work late hours? Or they work on a loud construction site and they can't really take a call during the day to chat with you. If you look at them up on Google Street View or drive by the property where they live, is it a Prius parked in the driveway or is it a huge truck with a gun rack and a Marines sticker on the back? Those things are going to tell you so much about who you're talking to. Okay, number 2, what is their perspective on their own property? This is such a big deal because everybody looks at their own situation, but sees it from a different perspective. I bought a property from a seller a couple years ago. And in my first conversation with her on the phone, she was like, oh man, this house is it's kind of a dump. You know, I had these renters in it. They just did not take care of it and this and that. And it's empty now, but I don't want to list it because it's kind of embarrassing. And I just don't want to have to do all the work to get it fixed up. And okay. So she absolutely set an expectation in my mind of what my experience was going to be like when I got to this house to visit it and see it with her. And I roll up to the house and it looks okay on the outside, whatever. But I get inside and she's like, see, pretty bad, huh? And I'm looking around thinking, oh my gosh, this is way, way better condition than I thought. I'm looking around seeing a $5,000 cosmetic, polishing and buffing on the inside, not a $20,000 renovation like she was sort of implying was needed. And it's really interesting to find out what is somebody's perspective on their own property. Do they think it's beautiful? Do they think that this property is in the highest demand neighborhood in town? How do they perceive its condition? What do they think that it's worth? Do they think that they are renting it at market rents? Do they think they're not renting it at market rents, for instance? A lot of sellers will say, well, I'm renting it for $1,500, but I'm just a softie, so it should be $2,100. They'll say things like that will give you an idea of what their perspective on their own property is. Do they manage it themselves? Where is their perspective coming from? Is it from boots on the ground, day-to-day management of their property and constantly looking at the comps? Or are they living in a state 1,000 miles away with a property management company that's handling it for them? What is their perspective on their own property? And how do they arrive at that perspective on their own property? Okay, the third question, the third set of insights we need to glean from our audience or about our audience is what is their self-image? How do they see themselves? I talk to a lot of people, especially in today's current strong seller's market, low inventory seller's market, who seem to think that they are geniuses for getting their name on the title of this property. There's almost a bit of an arrogance in their tone sometimes about, well, I own this property and obviously everybody wants to buy it. And there's kind of that tone about their self-image. And that's a really important insight. Do they see themselves as an average Joe? Do they see themselves as knowing what they're doing in this process? Do they see themselves as capable and confident as they contact you? Or do they see themselves as being new to this? Do they see themselves as not knowing what they're doing? And as a side note, does it feel like maybe they're sandbagging you, so to speak? Does it feel like they are kind of playing dumb? My coach Greg has got an expression that I just love that I see this a lot of times actually is they're dumb as a fox. They're playing themselves up and portraying themselves as being unsophisticated when they are actually more sophisticated. So the question here is, what is their self-image? How do they see themselves? The fourth question is, what is their perspective on the world? That's kind of a general question, but it's not too difficult a lot of times to get some clues about how somebody thinks maybe politically, for instance. What is their perspective on things like taxes? What is their perspective on things like a changing landlord-tenant law type of marketplace? If you have a seller who makes some comment about, well, I want to sell this property, but as you know, the last thing I want to do is give this administration more of my money to work with. Okay, well, now you know a lot about their worldview as it relates to politics and as it relates maybe to, fiscal policy and things like that. And those are super, super valuable insights about the mindset of your seller that you can ultimately use to present your proposal in light of how they see the world. Number 5, what is their perspective on the market? And the market can mean a few different things. The market can mean what is their perspective on the real estate market as a whole? I mean, do they even have an opinion on that? How in tune do they seem to even be with what's going on in the real estate sales market, or what's even going on in the real estate rental market? Do they indicate that they think it's overheated and it's time to get out? Do they indicate that they think it's just a continued rocket ship and it's just going to continue to keep going where it is? What do they think is going on with the real estate market? Secondly, kind of another subcomponent of what their perspective on the market could be is, what's their perspective on the world of real estate agents, for sale by owner approach, their perspective on other investors, etc. If they're making comments about how most of the investors that they've talked to are just slimy sharks who are just looking to take them for a ride, that tells you a lot about their mentality on the dynamics of the marketplace out there. If they say something along the lines of, why in the world would I ever pay a real estate agent 5 or 6% to do something I can do easily using the internet myself, that tells you a lot about their perspective on the marketplace. And that's very, very valuable for you to know. Question number 6, that is an insight that you need to glean about your seller, is what is their level of experience and their level of sophistication. As I mentioned, there's the dumb as a fox concept when they're actually fairly sophisticated, but they're portraying themselves as less so. But you're going to want to know, do they own other properties? Do they own vacation homes for themselves? Do they own other rental properties? What are those other rental properties? Are we talking about 40,000 square foot commercial properties? Are we talking maybe they have one other single family home? What is their portfolio like? And is this conversation you're having with them now, is this the type of conversation they've had 1,000 times before and they could do it in their sleep? Or is this kind of a new experience for them? You're going to want to put your finger on the pulse of what their level of experience and their level of sophistication is. Number 7, you're going to want to gain insights about why they are considering selling. Are there reasons, their rationale? Does it seem to be coming from their head? More of a rational, logical kind of approach? Or is it coming more from their heart? More of an emotional type of motivation, you might say, in why they're considering selling this property? Are they moving away from something in their life, like a problem? Or are they moving towards something in their life, like an opportunity, right? If somebody is selling a property because they just don't want to deal with tenants anymore, they're moving away from the situation that is a problem to them of tenants. Whereas if somebody says, we have to sell this house because we're going to buy our dream house in the next town over, that's something that they're moving towards. And that's a completely different set of motivations about why they're doing what they're doing. But regardless, whatever situation they are considering moving towards, they somehow see it better than the situation they have now. So you need to understand, what is it that is going to be better for them than what they have got going on now? How committed are they to this idea of making this change to a better situation? And why now specifically? Why weren't they pursuing this a year ago? Why not next year? Why is now the right time for this type of a thing? I think on a very related note, the 8th sort of topic that you need to glean insights on is, how does this property fit into their lives, right? If you talk to somebody who says that they lived in this house themselves for 30 years, raised 4 kids there, and then they recently moved out to downsize and they've just been renting it out for the last couple years, that's going to be a very different seller with a different set of emotional connections and whatnot than somebody who says, oh, I've never even visited that town. I live 500 miles away and I just bought it as an investment because my buddy said this was a good market to be in. Those are very different people. How the property fits into their lives is a big element. Is it just simply a income stream for them? Is it a detached, rational investment for them? Do they manage it themselves and they get to know their tenants and they take their tenants under their wing almost like they're kids or nephews and nieces? Or is it an arm's length thing where they barely even visit the property because they have a professional manager in place? How does this property fit into their lives, both in a functional sense and on a day-to-day sort of experiential sense? The next thing I want you to know, this is number 9, you need to gain some insight about what matters to them. As they're sifting through and sorting through this whole process, what are the things that make a difference to them? Do they care about who buys it and how they feel about that person? Now, there's a lot of sellers who do. They want to see their property go to good hands. But there are others who don't care at all about that. Is your seller somebody who cares what happens to the property next? There are a lot of sellers I've met who are selling an old house and they say, you're not going to tear it down, are you? And they wouldn't sell me the property if they thought that that's what I was going to do. So it's really, really important to understand what matters to them and how do they prioritize those things. Is what matters to them simply a practical function of like facilitating their next move, either a place that they want to move to personally? I once bought 2 houses from a guy at the same time because he needed to 1031 exchange those 2 houses into one bigger property that he really, really wanted to have. But he couldn't do that exchange unless I bought both of those properties. So that was the number one thing that mattered to him, was creating a situation where I could do both deals at the same time rather than just one or the other. Thing number 10 that you're going to want to try to ascertain about your seller in terms of insights is, what are the details of their ownership situation? In other words, how long have they owned this property? Is it owner occupied? Is it non-owner occupied? How much, if anything, do they owe on the property? What would their capital gains situation be like if they sold it? Are they planning to do some kind of an exchange to avoid those capital gains or to defer those capital gains? Do they care about capital gains? Is this something that is a primary driver for them or not? And one of the reasons that we need to really understand some of these questions about the length of their ownership, their owner occupancy or not, how much debt they have on the property or not, is that those things play in so much to their tax situation, which plays in turn so much to our ability to include some type of seller financing in our proposal ultimately. So we certainly want to have insights about the details of their ownership situation. Number 11, we want to have insight into who the other players are who are involved with this whole process for them. Do they have a spouse that is going to be a big part of this? Do they have kids, perhaps? Do they have, a friend or a neighbor? Do they have an advisor? Maybe it's an attorney or a CPA or somebody along those lines. Who are the other people whose opinions matter as it relates to these decisions that they're making? And category number 12, the final one that I'll cover with you today of insights that you need to glean about your seller, is what is their process going to be like? Do they even have a process? What are their considerations for this? Are they getting 3 offers from 3 different folks? Are they feeling it out with their heart to find somebody who they think is the right buyer? Are they looking for just the right type of proposal, and as soon as they get that proposal, they'll say yes? What's their ideal timing? Some people want to move quickly. Some people want to move slowly. Some people just want to move at whatever speed is going to feel right to them based on the unique buyer that they find. But what do they perceive their other alternative options to be? This is a big one. What do they think the other options are? Now, we all know that, of course, you can just call a realtor and you can always list a property. And there's no sense in trying to pretend like that's not one of their options. But what do they perceive their reasonable options are? This property I was telling you about that I just put in contract a couple days ago, I thought was really interesting. I'd never seen exactly a situation like this, where the seller was considering me, a guy sitting in his living room, having lengthy, detailed, extremely tailored conversations about the precise proposal that would get him where he's going in life. He was evaluating me and selling to Zillow or Opendoor. I thought that was a really strange array of options, because those things can be so different from each other that I thought there is nothing like their experience of working with me that is at all like their experience of working with Zillow or Opendoor. I imagine even the numbers are very different. But the point is, what do they perceive their other options to be? Because those are the things you're really competing with. Whatever they consider to be an alternative to you is your competition. So in summary for today's episode, as you can see, getting to know our audience is an extensive, multifaceted, and nuanced process. It's not just about filling in a worksheet, but hopefully you're also beginning to see how absolutely critical it can be to have these insights about our audience in the process of creating a proposal. And if we go in with an offer, a proposal in which we don't know any of this stuff about these people, the chances of just randomly hitting the target in a way that's going to work for them are really low. It'd be like grabbing a dart and putting on a blindfold and knowing just generally the direction of the dartboard to throw the dart. But if you know these things about them, then you've got the blindfold off and you're looking right at the target. Your chances of hitting that target with a proposal are so much better. So now that we know what insights we need to glean about our audience, the next question, of course, is how do we go about gleaning those insights? How do we extract those insights from the seller while keeping it conversational and without it sounding like an interrogation? And that, of course, my friends, is the subject of our next episode. So stay tuned for that. We'll get tactical about specific things you can say and ask that will get you the insights you are looking for. So thanks, as always, for listening to Sleaze-Free Real Estate Investing. As you know, next episode, we're going to be continuing this conversation and giving you insights and information and ideas about how to go about getting this accomplished with your seller. Again, please do yourself a big favor. Do us a big favor too by hitting the subscribe button in the podcast app. Would you also please do me a favor, just personally right now? It just takes a second. If you would go to iTunes and rate and review the show, just give your honest rating and your honest review of whatever you think about the show. We would so appreciate it because A, it gives us great feedback, but B, it also tells iTunes that people are paying attention, which then encourages iTunes to share the show with more people like you who might be able to get some value out of it. Reminder, there are show notes, including a transcript for today's episode at www.thoughtfulre.com/E27. And until next time, this is Jeff from The Thoughtful Real Estate Entrepreneur signing off. Hey there, thoughtful real estate entrepreneur. Before we get started with today's episode, I want to talk to you for just a second about marketing, because you can't buy properties unless you have leads of properties and sellers who are considering selling those properties. As you know, we as thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs love off-market deals. We love face-to-face negotiations with sellers because that's where we know we can absolutely have the best shot at creating a tailored win-win negotiation with the seller. But the question is, where do the leads come from? Well, as we like to do it here at the Thoughtful Real Estate Entrepreneur, it's direct mail letters. But you can't send letters unless you know who to send letters to. That's why I created a free PDF report for you to download right now called How to Get a Targeted, Ready-to-Use List of Quality Off-Market Seller Leads Without Spending a Dime. In this free report, you will learn the 3 simple steps to get the perfect list at no cost to you at all. And let's be honest, because we're thoughtful real estate entrepreneurs, we will also explain to you why this strategy and this technique works the way it does. To get this free report immediately, just go to sellerdirectmail.com and you can grab it. Just enter your email address and we'll email it to you absolutely immediately. Now on to today's episode.
Thanks for listening to Sleaze Free Real Estate Investing. Remember, solve the person to unlock the deal and solve the financing to unlock the profits.